I normally don't ask you guys this thing, but let's get the fucking subscribe. Don't come here and just watch the video and not subscribe. Don't come here and watch the video and fucking just hit like and scram off. Or, you know, leave a comment. And then you got people leaving thumbs down and they don't even say nothing mean to me. They just fucking thumbs down it. So listen, guys, I don't want to beg. Don't make me beg. But do all the things that the people ask you to do. Like, comment, share, subscribe, all that shit. Smash whatever. Smash your own fucking computer. Whatever you got to do, just come to me. I love you. DarkHorse loves you. Bye. Sure, everybody's going to come out of the woodwork and say that they weren't huge fans of Dillian Whyte to begin with. I gotta be, I mean, I'm not going to say that I wasn't a huge fan of the guy. But I was never completely sold. I always rated him right below the guys at the top. And I'm even talking about like the Luis Ortizes. You know, and if we're putting Andy Ruiz in like that middle tier where Ortiz is at, I'm even saying Andy Ruiz. I've never rated him as highly as the people that I've seen rate him based on the things that he's done, based on his resume, right? You can say, well, Dillian Whyte beat Joseph Parker. Ruiz lost to him, even though it's, you know, it's a fight that you can argue the outcome of. But again, even with every point that you wanted to make, I'm talking about what I saw on the TV screen from Dillian Whyte, or Dylan Whyte. I like to call him Dillian. I never saw it, right? So I didn't put I mean, there's polls out there if we're interested in checking. DarkHorse Boxing did pick Povetkin to win, but I never, you know, and I was speaking to somebody and they said, look, you know, they said, how do you have it? They said they think Povetkin's washed. I said, look, I've got nothing. I'm not going to go X's the nose on this. I'm going to go with my feeling, my gut, my bones. My bones tell me. I've seen the situation play out. You know, I've seen it happen to where people sit and they wait on the mandatory and they wait and they wait and they wait. And, you know, they end up getting clipped in somewhat of a stay busy fight. You know, Povetkin is an older guy. I don't think, you know, he certainly wasn't favored to win as far as the odds makers were concerned. And if I'm saying stay busy in the sense that as far as Whyte is concerned, he really only wants that shot at the WBC. So he turns around, you know, gets knocked out in, you know, devastating fashion. We're talking about one of these knockout of the year type things, an uppercut. Oddly enough, I like Joe George's knockout. I think it's still the more eye-pleasing and violent knockout. But, you know, for what it was, for the moment, for, you know, if you're talking about a guy that stepped up at the right time, Povetkin stepped up at the right time. It was a much bigger moment on a bigger stage. So I think that it'd be fair for that to be knockout of the year so far. So props to Povetkin. Heavyweight division is weird, man. It gets weird because if they order the rematch, which I'm sure they will, it's a mandatory rematch. They're gonna or there's a rematch clause in it. I'm sure Dillian Whyte's gonna take the rematch clause. If they order up the rematch, regardless of who wins that fight, that person at that point either retains the title in the case of Povetkin, or retains his rankings, I should say, his spot. Or if Dillian Whyte wins, I would imagine would go right back to where he was, right? Being the mandatory for whoever at that point between Wilder and Fury has the WBC belt. So at that point, the clock starts ticking. A year from that point, whoever has the WBC belt would have to then face the winner of Dillian Whyte and Povetkin in the rematch. Problem is that there's enough time there to where you can get the Wilder fight off and you can get the winner of Wilder to fight Joshua and you can leapfrog the Dillian Whyte situation over at the WBC. So it was a disastrous situation for Dillian Whyte. You feel for the guys. You hate to see it, as they say on Twitter. The fellers on Twitter say you hate to see it. But you know, it's one of those things, man. I think a lot of there was a certain segment of fans that wanted Dillian Whyte to, if he couldn't make that mandatory thing happen for himself, they wanted him to take other chances, take other opportunities. I think there was a Luis Ortiz opportunity that was there, that was serious, that was real. Money was offered. I don't care which side you're on. I've heard both arguments. You know, and I think that maybe both people can be, you know, maybe somewhat at fault. But we also got to remember at that point, Luis Ortiz had already fought Deontay Wilder. He had already gotten the bag. Dillian Whyte had fought Joshua. He had already gotten the bag. But I think that Dillian Whyte, I think he stood to benefit more from a fight with Luis Ortiz, assuming he could get past him. And I'm not too sure. Maybe it was beneficial that that fight didn't happen based on what we've seen, what we saw yesterday. And really, listen, I mean, you know, let's talk about the Oscar Rivas fight too. You know, we can't forget about that either, or that performance, right? So that was shitty. That was shitty for Dillian Whyte. Loved Persoon Taylor. Picked Persoon to win. I said it's going to go down the same way. Persoon's going to swarm her. I can't. You know what it is, man? When I see, because Katie's a legit, like, she's a beast of a boxer in terms of from a technical standpoint. When you see her throw punches, she's got like really good form, really good footwork, really good balance, really good technique. You know, she's the shit. Katie Taylor's the shit. But you get somebody like Persoon. This is somebody, you know, that's big for the division, or even probably just big in general. Just a big old girl, right? And she's throwing punches, and she's not only throwing punches at a rapid rate and moving forward. She's throwing very awkward type punches. I think that people like Katie Taylor, people like Floyd Mayweather, who had trouble with guys like Maidana, guys that throw punches from awkward angles. And if you're used to being these kind of technical fighters, I think that when somebody gives you a look that even if you've seen it one fight before, you know, again, in the case of Floyd, he saw Maidana twice. I think it's always going to be a problem because you don't really see people that do the things that these guys do. It's all wrong. It doesn't look great. It's not very appealing from a visual perspective, but it's, dare I say, annoying, it looks like, when Katie's in there with her, because Persoon is doing so many things with her hands, landing little soft, maybe not even punches. They almost look like pushes. Every now and again, a hard one lands enough to affect Katie, and it just seems like she can't get her bearing straight. When Katie was getting off, she was getting off really, really hard shots, maybe the more effective shots. But I scored for Persoon. I had it 6-4. I had Persoon up 5-4 going into the 10th. I think Taylor would have needed a knockdown at the very least to win the fight. I had Persoon winning, but the 7th round was a close round for me. I felt like there was a swing round, and there was like another early round there that was close. I could have seen a draw. I could have seen a Katie win by 1 point. Scorecards were atrocious, absolutely wrong. You know, you can't say that you saw Katie Taylor win 7 rounds in that fight. You know, you gotta, that's being super generous. 6 rounds would be super generous to Katie. You know, a draw would be a little generous to Katie. I felt like Persoon did enough to win the fight. Is what it is, though. Opens things up for Serrano. Serrano's not the same fighter that Persoon is. She doesn't have the same size. She's nowhere near the same size as Persoon. So she won't be able to, to smother Katie in that way, to maul Katie in that way. But Persoon and Serrano. But Serrano is going to land. She's going to land clean. Serrano's got legit power for a woman. You know what I mean? You can see, I'm not really big on the eye test, but when you watch the way she punches, the impact at which she hits, some of these women, Serrano can crack. So she's going to land on Katie. It'll be interesting. I think that Katie's the better overall boxer. But again, Serrano's power is that X factor. I hope they get that fight going. I can't imagine that they won't get that fight going. I think that Katie, I don't know if Katie's ever headlined a card, but I think it's time for Katie Taylor to headline a card. I think that's the card to do it. Serrano Taylor, let's get that going. Pretty cool fight. I thought it was a dope performance. Conor McGregor shouted her out at the end of the deal, so that was dope. The Fox card, that was a funny thing, man. The ratings are in for Fox. I think what they call the national, like, was it the national fast ratings or fast track ratings or something like that? It's got them at like 750,000 average viewership. I don't know, pay-per-view buys. That'd be a phenomenal pay-per-view. But 750,000 average viewers. That shocked the hell out of me, right? I think when all the numbers will come in, it'll come in somewhere around 900,000, 950,000, because this fast average is like, all the info is not in, but it's enough, right? We've got enough of the bulk of the numbers to see kind of where we're at. I would imagine it's gonna uptick a little bit, settle somewhere around 900,000, but that's not it's not what you would expect on Fox from PBC. And again, these aren't accurate, like these are rough estimate type deals. But again, it's, if you're somebody that saw what happened last week with the numbers with James and Delorme, and you saw that they were at, I think it ended up when it was all said and done, 1.1 million on average. You would imagine Sean would be able to do better than that. Again, we've got the NBA, we've got ESPN, we had boxing going on ESPN Plus. There's a bunch of shit going on yesterday. But I can't imagine that anybody over at PBC on Fox is happy, even if they're taking all these things into account. Not very good numbers. You would, again, I would expect for those numbers to have been better at the very least than last week's numbers. I thought they would have been 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, somewhere up there, maybe as high as 1.6, considering that Plant Feigenbutts did 1.5 million, right? So that's very interesting. I thought Sean looked sharp as hell. He looked crispy as hell. I want to see Sean versus Thurman. That's the fight I want to see. I think it's the fight that makes the most sense. If Thurman's talking about fighting Bud and he wants 10 million to fight Bud, he more than likely ain't going to get 10 million to fight Sean, but he'd get paid to fight Sean. Sean versus Thurman on Fox, assuming that there's no NBA on, would be a monster fight in terms of ratings. And it answers a ton of questions, right? Because my questions, as far as Sean Porter is concerned, you see the performance he put in against Formella. I know he's still quick. I know he's still explosive. I know that if you're standing in front of him looking to time Sean Porter, you ain't going to be able to time the fucking guy, because he's outside. He's on the outside and he'll close the distance before you can even react to it. And then that's it. He's on you. He's a dog. And he's going to land hard. He's going to land often. He's going to put shots together to the body, and go upstairs. And he looked really, really sharp yesterday. So I'm not worried about Sean Porter. But I do want to know where Keith Thurman is at. And not only that, I do want to know, where do we place this win that Pacquiao got over Thurman in terms of in terms of boxing history? How do we couch this Pacquiao win? Because right now, you saw the fight that Thurman had with Josecito Lopez, and you've got to say that's not what we were necessarily expecting. You see the first round that Pacquiao has against Thurman, and again, that's not it's not what we're expecting out of Thurman. But Thurman comes on strong. Pacquiao's a legend, and Thurman is able to Thurman's actually able to close the show out strong and make it competitive enough to where on some cards, I think myself included, I had Thurman winning the fight, right? But we also know, prime for prime, what the outcome was between Sean and Keith. And something tells me that maybe Sean, I don't think that Keith would beat Sean at this point. I'd be surprised. If Keith beat Sean at this point, it changes, it puts the win that Pacquiao got over Keith at a much higher level in my mind. I don't want to get into the Floyd Pacquiao argument because it doesn't put Pacquiao over the top. But it's a hell of a win at that point. Now, if what I think might happen if Sean fights Keith happens, and Sean comes out and beats Keith up and outboxes him and, you know, maybe touches him to the body and, you know, I don't know, maybe gets him up out of there. I don't know if Keith, again, it's a question mark. I don't know if Keith is the same guy, but if that does happen, then it changes things as far as the way I rate the Pacquiao fight. I don't know if this is the right thinking. I know that styles make fights and all that good shit, but I've always had that suspicion that that win, while I give Pacquiao all the credit in the world, I think that Keith, I think that the deterioration or that the you know, as much as Keith may have lost a step, played just as much of a factor towards Pacquiao getting that victory over him. So that's who I would love to see next for Sean Porter. Dug the performance. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot to, you know, I don't know this Formella guy, so I don't really know what else to say beyond that. Fundora was fun. Fundora I hope somebody did this, the fun pun, but Fundora put the fun in Fundora. Fun fight. Nice to look at. Guy's a freak, 6'5". There was a time in the, 2010s, 11s or something like that we thought Paul Williams was a freak. He was 6'1" as a welterweight. People never even fucking heard of it. You know, he was like the next Tommy Hearns, who I think also they showed the graphic. Was he also 6'1" or 6'2"? Not very tall. This guy's 6'5". I should, you know, I'm burying the lead here, but you know, yeah, he's a tall dude. It's very odd to see, but it's very visually pleasing. And especially that he fights in a visually pleasing way. He fights kind of short and he fights on the inside. I think it's dope. People really enjoyed that performance. Now, if we go over, let's look over Gallimore, the win losses real quick or whatever, because Gallimore's been in tough. He's never been stopped. So, and I just want to make sure, but I know some of these names, but I want to make sure I get them all. So he's never been stopped. You look at that. I mean, lastly, he was in the last fight he was in with Lubin. I was at that fight. I would imagine that Erickson Lubin thought that he would be able to get Gallimore up out of there. Hit him with a ton of hard shots in that fight. You know, beat him pretty clearly, but wasn't able to do it. Right? We've got a loss to J-Rock. We got a loss UD to Teixeira. We've got a loss UD to Erickson Lubin. These are good fighters. Right? And then we've got, what do we have? We've got a TKO, obviously, Jason Rosario. So he's been in with some tough guys. Fundora comes out there, you know, again, goes ham on him, throws a ton of punches in bunches, touches him up, touches him to the body. You know, at the end, actually the last series, Goosen didn't even call it. I'm sure everybody peeped it by now, but he lands like a really quick, kidney shot on the inside. Gallimore does one of these jobbies, starts to kind of crouch down, and Fundora gets him out of there with a 4 or 5 piece combo. Ray Corona calls the fight off, and that's pretty much all she wrote. People are calling for like the top of the division, the J-Rocks, the Jarrett Herds. I'm down with it. You know, at this point, 154 is so lit. There's so many good quality fights that could be made out there. If Fundora, if they want to fast track this kid and this kid feels that he's ready for that level of competition, I'd like to see him in with Jarrett Hurd. You know, this is a guy that is also a physically big dude. It's not very often probably that he's the smaller guy, but he would certainly be the smaller guy in terms of height. Hurd's got a broad back. He's a big guy himself. He also throws a bunch of punches. It would be a war of attrition. I'd love to see how that fight would play out. People want J-Rock. People want all kinds of guys for this Fundora. So it'll be interesting to see. I think he needs to tighten up the defense. I mean, unless he really does have a granite chin. I mean, I saw him take a bunch of shots from Gallimore. Unless he really does have a granite chin, though, He can't be getting caught like that, especially seeing how there was a few times to where he actually had his guard up, but like just mispositioned here somewhere, sometimes like way down here. And Gallimore's landing shots that otherwise, had he just had his guard up and chin tucked, he can just probably catch those shots on his gloves and get away with essentially blocking them. So, you know, these are things that he would probably have to tighten up the defense a little bit, so on and so forth. But if he does have a granite chin and he's just walking through everybody's shit, then I tend to agree with the people that think that he's going to give anybody a run for their money at 154 pounds, because he's a very big guy. He leans on you, gets you tired, throws punches. He's got a gas tank. He punches, he puts his punches together well, throws punches for days. And I'd be very interested to see what's next for this kid. I thought Joe Smith Jr. could get it done going in. I think I favored Alvarez. As a matter of fact, I did favor Alvarez. Joe Smith is he's just a tough son of a bitch. They went out of their way to mention the fact that he was a union guy, carpenter guy. Normally, I think that's corny when the commentary guys say things like that. I don't, because I know how these things happen. They usually ask these guys questions like fucking 2 days before at the fighter meeting, and somebody will throw in some kind of quirky little question in there, and everybody and their mother will run with it and whatever. And Joe Smith, we've known this about him for years on end, so it gets a little bit repetitive. But in boxing, as it relates to boxing, I think that when you got a union guy, maybe this is because I'm a union guy, I'm a brother myself. I think it's something you got to bring it up in the case of Joe Smith Jr., especially if you're in the union. If you've been in the union yourself and somebody's saying it on TV and they're saying this is a union guy, carpenter, right? Now I know. I'm watching from home. I'm a union electrician. I work with the carpenters. I love the carpenters. We banter. We go back and forth. We call them glorified laborers. We fucking make fun of them, right? But in reality, every electrician knows in the back of their mind, you don't want to fight. They're crazy. The carpenters are crazy people. I hang with them. I drink with them. I don't hang with the electricians. But the electricians are a little bit more cerebral. We got to go to school for 4 years. These guys go to school for 1 year to learn how to swing a fucking hammer. Not the brightest guys, but they're fucking tough and crazy. And there's a lot of them. So we make fun of them, but we're afraid of them a little bit. Joe Smith is one of these guys. That's the point. He's cut from this cloth. He's a crazy guy. Comes after Alvarez, and essentially, I agree with the call with Tim and with Dre. You don't want to be sitting there if you're Alvarez, right? Assuming that you could take Smith's punches, you don't want to be getting touched up the way he was. Alvarez obviously was looking to load up, catch him with the single shot, and get him out of there. And he waited, what was it? Maybe 7 in the 7th round. I think he landed a really, really hard shot on Smith. Smith was hurt. If Alvarez pressed it at that point, I wouldn't be surprised if he was able to get him up out of there, like really pressed it and just started just emptying the gas tank out. That would have been the opportunity to do it. But he kind of let Smith off the hook. At that point, I think that Smith realized, I even tweeted it out, I think that Smith realized, like, okay, I can't get hit like that again, because he was ready to go there. A round went by. It was a decent little round for Smith. And the very next round, the second that he had him hurt, he went balls to the wall and got the job done. And I was impressed. Joe Smith is one of these guys. He's one of these guys at 175 pounds that if you don't got your shit together, or if you're starting to slip, or if you are losing a step, Joe Smith is the guy that's he's your Huckleberry. He's going to look that up. Let's see what's wrong with you here, right? Almost like a tune-up. Joe Smith is a mechanic. Okay, let's see what's working and what's not. And in the case of Alvarez, I think that we know that at this point, at the very highest of the high, he ain't quite there. We also know that Joe Smith ain't quite there, but he's a serviceable opponent for a guy like Canelo, for a guy like Beterbiev, for obviously a guy like Bivol, who I think is going to struggle finding opponents more so than the other guys that I mentioned. So it'd be interesting, right? I'd take Joe Smith at this point. I think more, over the Yildirim fight. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Yildirim. I've only ever read it, I think. Yeah, I think I'd take Joe Smith over him. Canelo and Joe Smith, and I think that for Beterbiev, I think that's a real dope fight. Obviously, I'd favor Smith to lose both of those fights, but again, I know what I'm getting. I know that I'm going to get a guy that's going to put in a good, a really tough fought effort. In the case of Kovalev, again, maybe Kovalev was at a point with Canelo, and again, it was hell making weight for that camp and so on and so forth. But Kovalev was not prepared. Joe Smith Jr. would be prepared, and it's a fight that I would be interested in seeing. Not giving them my $20. Will never give them my $20, unless a million things change over there. But I'll stream it. I'll watch it. I'll want to watch it. I would, under normal circumstances, give them my 20. We're talking about just off a GP. We're not doing it, though. So that's the Dark Horse Boxing Show. I think I covered it all. I hope I covered it all. I appreciate that you guys stuck around, hung out with me.